30 years and 1 day, that's how long Matteo Messina Denaro remained in power. It was January 15th, 1993, when CRIMOR, the special unit of the Raggruppamento Operativo Speciale, led by Captain Ultimo, made an arrest in Palermo. Totorina, the boss of bosses, the beast, the man who started Cosa Nostra's season of massacres, a season that would continue even after his arrest. Well, after Totorina's fall, there were two major bosses left at large. One was a former associate of Rina, Binu, Bernardo Provenzano, the tractor, Uncle Bernardo, Uncle Provenzano, the man who had personally killed Michel Cavataio, the main instigator of the first great mafia war, the one from the early 1960s. Then, with the capture of Provenzano in April 2006, Matteo Messina Denaro became the undisputed king of Cosa Nostra. But who is Matteo Messina Denaro? And what happens now in the difficult daily confrontation between the Italian state and mafia-style organized crime? Let's try to understand a bit more. Matteo Messina Denaro received his first charge for mafia-style criminal association in 1989, which was 4 years before the arrest of Totorina. But in a short time, he had a meteoric rise to the top, to what is the highest level of Cosa Nostra. Already in 1991, Matteo Messina Denaro got his hands dirty with blood by killing Nicola Gonzalez, the owner of a hotel in Tresina, a man who had basically complained about the mafia presence in the area. Matteo Messina Denaro, at that time, was a member of the Castelvetrano clan, his hometown. And few people, probably outside of mafia circles, would have bet on his rapid rise to the top. Of that young man, just a little more than a boy. He wasn't even 30 years old when he committed his first murder. And yet there was someone who was already betting on him. That someone was Baldurato, Duccio Di Maggio, former driver and bodyguard of Rina, the man who would have Rina captured as personal retaliation against Cosa Nostra, which had sentenced him to death. Well, years later, Di Maggio would tell the investigating magistrates that Matteo Messina, even in the early 1990s, Denaro was seen as ambitious. A young man who, even if he didn't have an official title as a boss, managed to have enough charisma to earn respect. And besides, Matteo Messina Denaro's father had already given him broad authority over the Castelvetrano district. His father, Francesco Messina Denaro, after all, already had the scent of the mafia about him. It's no coincidence that the godfather at the confirmation of a very young Matteo Messina Denaro was Antonino Marotta, a picciotto, a man of honor, a punciuto, in short, a mafioso. A man who, before joining, was already an official boss, managed quite a lot, and became a boss. Already in 92, he had joined the teams of killers in Brancaccio, in the province of Trapani, in Rome. He was given assignments before carrying out surveillance for the attack that Maurizio Costanzo would suffer. Then to kill Minister Claudio Martelli, a socialist accused by the mafia of not respecting agreements, and Giovanni Falcone, the magistrate on the front line against the mafia. Later in July 1992, Falcone was already dead, and Borsellino was torn apart by the bomb on Via D'Amelio. Matteo Messina Denaro was one of the actual killers of Alcamo clan boss Vincenzo Milazzo. Why? Because Milazzo was seeking his own independence from the rule of the Corleonesi, from the rule of Totorina, from the rule of the winning faction of the Second Mafia War. From that moment on, Matteo Messina Denaro would become a trusted man, even though he hadn't managed to kill Deputy Commissioner Calogero Germana in Mazzara del Vallo. It doesn't matter. His strong ties with Bagarella, with Brusca, with the Graviano brothers, All the men involved in Cosa Nostra's bombing strategy had made him a boss, or at least worthy of becoming one. A boss who would establish himself over the years, after the arrest of Arena, and even more so after the arrests of Brusca, and especially Bernardo. Provenzano, Irina, and Provenzano symbolized the old mafia in some ways. They had both been students of Luciano Leggio Usciancato, the man who had led the old rural mafia, that of Dr. Michel Navarra, into the real 20th century. It was Leggio who killed Michel Navarra, the old mafia boss of Corleone. It was also Leggio, together with other accomplices, who killed Placido Risotto, the anti-mafia union leader from Corleone. We've already discussed this and other topics, but not with Leggio anymore. The stars of Irina and Provenzano were on the rise, those who had ordered the outbreak of the Second Mafia War. The killing of the Prince of Villagrazia, Stefano Bontate, the ruthless war against Incerillo, who was later killed, the decision to exterminate the Buscetta clan, all to seize power, and in the midst of it all, the killing of many servants of the state who had bravely opposed them, like Pier Santi Mattarella, who had refused to embrace Cosa Nostra. Continuing with former Carabinieri General Carlo Alberto Dalla Chiesa, the man with the insignia on his uniform. A prefect promised special powers for Palermo but never received them. We have already talked about him in another video. And then, of course, Rocco Cinici, Nini Cassarà, Commissioner Montana, Falcone, Borsellino. So many deaths along the streets of Palermo, decided by the Corleonesi, with whom Matteo Messina Denaro felt extremely close. From here, he would have gained a great deal of trust, while the bosses, one after another, were brought to justice. What has always given an aura of disbelief around the figure of Matteo Messina Denaro was his elusiveness. It's no coincidence that he was nicknamed Diabolic. Yes, like the comic book character, elusive, impossible. Even giving him a real face was difficult. For a long time, for decades, Matteo Messina Denaro had a young face, obviously no longer replicable, and a graphic reconstruction of supposed aging. There were no images, there were no photographs, there were no portraits, there was nothing. Almost a man without a face. That's also why he was called Diabolic. Like the criminal who makes extremely realistic masks to hide himself, to blend into civil society, into everyday life. Uncatchable, elusive, and without a face. Yet, since 2006 until today, he has been able to call the shots, to make the decisions himself. How business had to be managed. Dirty business, drug trafficking, arms trafficking, money laundering, even trafficking involving waste, industrial waste, and more. It must be said that a lot has been said, a lot has been written, and perhaps even a bit speculated about the figure of Matteo Messina Denaro. But let's get to his arrest. Let's get to the morning of January 16th, 2023, to the Carabinieri raid, in a clinic that Matteo Messina Denaro used to frequent. He had been going there nearly 2 years after learning about his tumor. For hospitalizations and surgeries, he had provided a false identity. Maybe that's exactly what led to his arrest. Because after all, even when going to private facilities, you need to provide documents, a tax code, a health card. Those documents made out to a certain bona fide were fake. And maybe that's exactly what triggered the traps set up by the police. Again from Ross, the special operations group that 30 years and 1 day after the raid against Totorina has repeated and given a second act. But at this point, questions arise. How did it happen for Rina 30 years ago? How did it happen later for Bernardo Provenzano? Is the capture of a boss a real achievement or just an attempt at cleaning up on the part of Cosa Nostra? Some official documents state that with Matteo Messina Denaro's capture, basically the dominant phase of Cosa Nostra has come to an end. In short, the mafia should now be defeated. Are we sure about that? The mafia has not proven to be defeated, not with the high-profile arrests of 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago, and not even with the actions of Prefect Mori. Under fascism, the mafia has always known how to recycle and renew itself, like the tail of a lizard that regenerates, or like the mythological hydra that has one immortal head while the others grow back even if they are cut off. So the arrest of Matteo Messina Denaro, as much as it is certainly due to investigative work and the cleverness and readiness of the Raggruppamento Operativo Speciale, how much credit goes to the Raggruppamento Operativo Speciale, and how much is actually the doing of those who want to take Matteo Messina Denaro's place? Believing that the mafia ended with him is utopian. There are still many fugitive bosses. There are still many dirty deals to handle. There are still many illegal activities going on. And so there are always hidden interests that don't want to come to light and don't want to be disturbed or interrupted. It's likely, in fact, that by now the former primula rosa of the mafia had become useless or no longer so essential for the organization chart of Cosa Nostra. It's likely that in his place during these 30 years on the run, new bosses had emerged, capable over time of growing, of understanding the new mechanisms, of adapting to the 21st century and to the ever-increasing and unstoppable technological progress. Not only that, and so they were destined to take the place of those who came before them, now considered no longer suited to modern times. After all, it's rare for young, ambitious, or rising bosses to be arrested. Most of the time, there are people in their 60s, like in the case of Matteo Messina Denaro, or even older, people who are worn out. They've contributed a lot for years, and replacements are always available. That's what is frightening, because even after capturing the top fugitive, the job isn't finished. It can't be considered finished. There will always be someone else behind him, someone to search for, someone to identify and arrest. There will still be shady dealings to stop as long as there is an interest, a fundamental interest, an interest that weaves together too many dangerous connections. Because after all, the mafia alone doesn't do anything anymore. Exactly, alone. The days are gone when the clans acted alone or just targeted the small businessman. For decades now, the mafia has been making deals with local politics, and not just with entrepreneurs, but also with foreign cartels. It's a network of interests, a network of alliances, a network that drips with blood and dirty money. And to put an end to it, you would have to burn the web, sterilize, kill the female spider that keeps generating. It's not easy, and besides a great amount of resources, it also requires a strong will. We at the channel Dentro la Storia join in the praise for the police forces, the Carabinieri, and the Italian investigating magistrates. But we also urge them not to stop, not to enjoy too much the joy of fleeting glory, but rather to persist, to continue, to find the answers that all of us ordinary citizens are waiting for regarding the great mysteries of Cosa Nostra, the major massacres, the serious acts of bloodshed, and the unspeakable pacts. Arrests are not enough. We need to bring clarity. We need to clean things up. Everyone needs to give a pedagogical dimension to everything that happens, to teach the value of legality to the kids above all, because one day it will be up to them. And if we manage to make the very young generations understand, the same ones who, years ago, celebrated the figure of Diabolic in murals, Matteo Messina Denaro, if we can make them understand that there is nothing to celebrate and nothing to emulate, just as there is no glory, no honor, no humanity in behaving in a certain way, then maybe, yes, one day we will finally be able to say enough with Cosa Nostra.